Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 346XP chainsaw. Customer complaint is that it won't start. So the first thing I always do is look in the fuel tank. I want to see what they're trying to burn. I'll dump it into a funnel like this and inspect it a little bit closer. I can tell if there's any water in it by shining a light in the bottom of the fuel. All that water would settle to the bottom, but in this case, there's no water in it. The fuel color itself is a little bit dark, but that might just be the oil that he's using. I'm not too concerned about the fuel. It smelled pretty good. Let's keep digging and see what there is to see. This fuel filter looks like it's been in here a while, and it's a little dark on the end. That should be replaced. I'm sure that's not the reason it's not starting, but maybe a hole in the fuel line would explain it. I'm going to put 10 pounds of pressure on here, and it's holding. That means the fuel line does not have a hole in it or a crack, and the carburetor's tight. So I wonder why this thing won't start. I'm going to put a new filter on here. You know, this could come back to bite me if I later find out that there's something major wrong with the saw. But I would just have to come back and get a new filter, or take my old filter back, I should say. I had to cut the end because it kind of had a memory and that filter didn't hang on there very well. But I'm not looking to replace the fuel line right now. I don't know why this won't start yet, so we could always come back to that. Let's take a look under the hood and see what we got going on. We'll take a look at the air filter.
Are you hoping for that chain yet today, Scott? Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. Nobody's ripped my head off and screaming down my neck.
Not until I walk out the door.
Right?
All right.
The air filter's a little bit dirty, but it's a nylon mesh filter. We'll be able to blow this out and clean it up. But you know, that little bit of a dirty filter probably is not the reason why this thing won't start. Let's just make sure that the filter's not compromised. I'll shine a light behind it so I can get a better look. You know, if I see light just blasting directly through where there's a tear or something, well then, yeah, I would know there's a tear, right? We're going to clean this up a little bit, get rid of the schmutz, so we can work on this thing. I'm going to want to start this thing up and see if I can get it to run. But you know, I want to make these preliminary checks first. I see some black residue by the exhaust at the muffler. Not sure what to think of that just yet. Broke that clip. I don't know why I decided to fix this clip at this point, because if you use the logic that I used on the fuel filter, where I'm not sure if we're going to get this thing running, why would I replace a fuel line if I don't know if it's going to go running? So why am I replacing a clip? Nah, I don't know. You know, I get interrupted at doing these repairs so many times, sometimes I forget where I am. But we're going to replace the clip anyway. It's just a used clip off a junk saw. So there we go. Oh. There we go. Alright, let's keep pushing forward. We're going to look in the cylinder and make sure it's not scored. You know, our spark plug looks decent. It's not like all carbon fouled or something. Let's look inside that cylinder. It's not scored. It's clean and shiny. Now at this point I could have checked for spark, but I really have it stuck in my head that I want to try and start this thing and see how it runs. So let's prime it up and see. It ain't going to prime that way, is it? Someone dumped all the fuel out of it. So because I wasn't sure about the quality of his fuel 100%, I'm putting my own mix in here. And then we'll prime it up and see if this thing will run. Yeah, it looks like it's priming decent. Let's choke it.
Well, there's your problem right there.
Something ain't right here. You know, if there's a problem with that choke lever, that would certainly explain the can't get it to start complaint. So if you take a look at this lever here on this side, that's connected to the choke shaft. When I pull the blue lever, that should be moving, but it's not. There's something going on there. So as it turns out, you know, we're going to take these rubber saddles off here that connect to the air filter base so we can loosen this up and gain a little bit better access to that choke lever. I think it's just kind of jammed up in there. The red piece is the stop switch. So what happened was the blue choke lever pulled out of the hole in the linkage on the side of the carburetor for the choke. And it kind of got behind it, so it wiggled it a little bit, but it didn't move the lever. So when I push the lever back in where it belongs, you can see now that the choke functions the way it should. When I pull it out like that, it catches the throttle shaft, sets it to fast idle, and then when you pull the trigger, it releases. So let's see if it runs. So there you have it. It does run. The reason it wouldn't start for him was that the choke had disconnected from the carburetor. Now that blue lever, it just snaps into place. There's really no physical connection. And I'll show you that a little bit closer later on. But I've decided that, you know, if it pulled out of there once, it's going to pull out of there again. And if I just send it back this way, it's going to come back, and then customers going to be grumpy about that, and that'd be justified. So I'm going to replace that choke lever. On this side of the carburetor, there's a little wire here that goes in front of the throttle rod. We move that out of place, and then we can grab that throttle rod and pull it out of there's a little Z-bend in it. We can pull it out of the notch in the carburetor linkage. We're fumbling a little bit. We're going to hold the throttle open manually, and then we're going to lift the rod up out of the linkage. Just give it a jerk. There we go. Now you can pull that rod right out. And then I also took the rubber sleeve or wall or boot, whatever you want to call it. I took that out of there as well. Get it out of my way. So now we're removing the two screws that hold. They go through the air filter base and through the carburetor and into the intake manifold. They hold the carb in place, right? So we got those out. This one's coming out. And what we want to do is gain a little bit better access to this carburetor and choke lever and replace that lever. So there's a rubber saddle, and there's a rubber saddle. That fuel line I just had my finger on was a vent that goes up to that intake base or air filter base. And now we have that base off to the side where we can work on it. The carburetor doesn't have to come off for any of this. All right, the blue lever and the red lever, you can see that there's a stop on the blue lever, so it only pulls out so far. And when it pulls out, it actually grabs the red lever, which is the stop switch, and moves it into the start position. So you pull out on the blue lever, and it forces the red lever up into the run position. All right, so I have removed the blue wire, and now I'm going to remove the contact that goes into the stop switch, and that's got the ground wire on the end of it. So there's a Z-bend in there, and it fits into the air filter base, and then it rests in the stop switch. Now to get that stop switch off, there's a little tab here. You release the tab and then give it a pull. You should be able to remove that switch from the base. It's not really coming off easy, so we're going to grab our handy dandy scrunch and pry it off of there. Just force it. There we go. All right, you look right there. That's that little tab we had to release. There's a little hook. Now the blue choke lever, that can be removed, and you got to kind of twist it and manipulate it to get it out of there, but there it is. Now where that split is on the end, that's where it pulled out of the carburetor, and it just doesn't have a sharp edge on it anymore because it's old and worn, and it's been snapped out of there a couple times probably. I would guess that at some point this carb was refreshed and it had to be removed at that point. And every time you do it, that little catch on the end of the choke lever, that wears a little bit more. So there's our little tab on the red lever. Make sure that's facing down. Quick way to orient which way it goes. And that'll snap right into place. There you go. Looks good. So you got a better idea of how that blue lever pulls on the red one. Everything seems to be moving freely. We'll put our Z-bend stainless contact in place. Just like that. And then the blue wire. Well, there's a holder that matches the shape of the end of the terminal on that wire. So here's a closer look at it. If you hit the stop switch down, it makes contact. If you pull the choke out, it releases contact, lifts the red lever up. Push the choke in, you're running the saw. Push the red lever down, you're stopping the saw. Simple stuff. All right, let's put this back together and we'll give it another test run and make sure it's working right. So there's the blue lever. It goes into the end of the linkage on the carburetor. We snap it in there. And then we're just getting the air filter base lined up with the carburetor. I'm not sure what I was pushing on right there, but something was clearly in the way. Yeah. Quick look at the choke. It seems to be working right. Let's get these screws in here. Now everything's got to be lined up just right. You got the air filter base, you got the carburetor, and then you got the intake manifold, we'll call it, that the screws run into. And it's kind of a tight fit. You can see I'm struggling with this a little bit. Got the one, I don't think it's even started yet. This one definitely screwed in tight. This one still won't catch. So I got to loosen the other one back up and then come back to this one and see if I can get it to catch. There we go. Alright, now we put our tank vent line on. Just looking at the choke again. Looks like it's working. Trigger don't work yet. I guess we got to put that on. So we have our rubber boot. We're going to drop that into place. And you'll see here in a minute that I don't quite have it in place. Pushing the throttle rod into the end of the trigger lever. Dropping it on the carburetor linkage, and then moving the little metal wire catch to hold that rod in place. But it's not really working right. Look, when I squeeze the trigger, I'm not getting much for travel there at all. Well, that boot's got a couple of grooves in it, and I just don't quite have it seated in there right, and it's rubbing on that throttle rod. All right, we're going to give this thing a try and see if it runs, and if it does, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 346XP chainsaw. It needed a new choke lever. Thanks for watching. Later.